You want us to take back people who've been nurtured on hate for 13 years on the basis of a resolution of 1948 talking of those wishing to live in peace, nurtured on hate and vengeance and destruction, take them back into our state when we have 10% Arab population. For what? They can rip us apart? They should be schizophrenic? Take them out of a total Arab environment where they live, where they can create, economically, socially, religiously, but psychologically part, bring them in to be a minority in a Jewish state, and this will help the problem of the Middle East. There is money, there is land, there is water. All that is needed is a part of that humanitarian benevolence and sense of duty to which you referred. Professor Toynbee, in 1948, the war of aggression unleashed on us created two refugee problems. One related to some 550,000 Arabs. The other related to some 400,000 Jews and 70,000 Arabs. We have settled the second problem. We've absorbed over 400,000 Jews from Arab countries who were there of longer standing than the same Arabs in Palestine. We've settled them, we've taken them in as brothers, and we have settled 70,000 Arab refugees in the country. The only Arab refugees which have been struck off from UNRWA rolls are those which we have taken into our economy. The other problem has not moved, not because there's no money, not because there's no possibility, but purely because a humanitarian problem is being put into a totally political context of animosity and hatred. And the feelings of these poor people and their future, their very life, is being sacrificed on what? Some demagogic ambition of control and rule throughout the Middle East. Every international assessment of it, every report has recommended a movement in the direction of economic integration, of broadening economic possibilities, and we will play our part. There's no question on that. We long to see the problem solved as you do, but it will not be solved by formulas, it will not be solved within a context where they refuse to talk to us. It will not be solved when these refugees are being prepared to destroy us. Only a few months ago, last month, Professor Toynbee, a representative of the Arab refugees appeared in the United Nations. What did he speak about? The destruction of Israel, the extermination of Israel. He was probably told to do so by a certain government in the Middle East. He said so. So you tell us now, 48 they talked of coming back in peace. Now take them back after 13 years and he says he wants to destroy you. Why not? Let him come in and rip you apart. Please commit suicide, so at least the Arab armies won't have to overwhelm you from without. That, sir, I think in the scan of history you will find no nation has been prepared to do, and since you said earlier that in certain respects we belong to a whole category of nations in our behavior, in this respect too, we will not commit suicide.
I think there are 2 points in what the ambassador has said. One is repatriation, and the other is using refugees as pawns. I think there is an inconsistency in the Israeli stand. You claim for Jews repatriation into Palestine, though it's since as long ago as 135 AD, there's been no solid Jewish population in Palestine, though I agree with the ambassador, there always have been Jews in Palestine as a minority, a rather small minority. And those since, I think, 63 or 64 BC, there haven't been a Jewish state in Palestine. And you've claimed repatriation not in the terms of the Balfour Declaration, a Jewish national home, but not a state, but in the extreme form of a state. But same time, you deny to the Arabs who were forced out of Palestine, of the Israeli part of Palestine, as recently as 1948, the very thing that you claim as the central claim of the Jewish people. That is inconsistent. Then, using refugees as pawns, I have had opportunities of talking to representatives of the Arab states within the last few years, and by the way, I think the Zionist organization and the Israel government are rather living in a glass house about this question of using refugees as pawns, because I think some pretty telling comparisons could be made between their use of Jewish refugees as pawns and the Arab government's use of Arab refugees as pawns. I think both things are detestable things to do to people in the distress that refugees are in, and I think both the Israelis and Zionists and the Arab states have been guilty of this rather disgusting thing to do. When I've talked, I've had opportunities of talking with the Arab states, I have pointed out the policy of the West German government since the war. As you can see, I'm not partial to Germans particularly, certainly not partial to Nazis. I'm no reason to be particularly friendly to Germans. But I have pointed out that the West German government since the war has been more wise as well as more humane. It's more important to be humane than to be wise than the governments of the Arab states since 1948. The West German government had, I suppose, received, what the numbers run to, 6 million, 8 million, something? 9 million, is it, refugees from, partly from Eastern Germany, partly from those territories that were part of Germany before the Second World War, which are now parts of Poland and the Soviet Union. The West German government, as far as I know, has not relinquished its claim to 1 inch of territories that were German east of the present boundary of Western Germany, to German before the Second World War. I'm not going to the question as to whether the German claims to recover those territories are good or bad. That doesn't really concern us here. But my point is that the West Germans have separated, and this I think they were thoroughly right, the question of claims to territory which the refugees come from, and what to do about the refugees meanwhile. And Western Germany, to her credit, of her heart and her head, has taken the humane and sensible line of absorbing the refugees without renouncing claims to these refugees' homes and territory into her life and into her industry. And one of the reasons why Western Germany is prosperous and powerful now is that she has given these refugees a chance of work, and that means a chance of happiness and prosperity. And her voice is powerful among the nations now because of that. And I've said to the Arab states, why don't you do that? You don't have to relinquish the claim of the Palestinian Arabs to Palestine by absorbing them at present into your industry. You'll be in a stronger position to press your claim later. I'm sorry that they don't take this line, which I think it's silly of them politically, but I'm much more concerned with the humanities side. But I do think, as I said, Israel is living in a glass house in drawing attention to this particular side of the Arab states policy, because I think that many things can be said, especially about the time immediately after the end of the World War, about Jewish refugees who were directed for political or not humanitarian reasons to Palestine, when they could have had immediate homes and a much better future, I would say, in Australia or in the North American continent. And I think politics were played with the Jewish refugees, just as they're being played now with the Arab refugees. I condemn both.
I just say, Professor, on this question of politics of refugees, yes. I've seen a lot of criticism of the attitudes of various governments after World War II, that they had no room for our refugees. I believe even you yourself have mentioned it in some context, that they did not open their gates to refugees. But I must, and this I do on basis of personal knowledge, I must reject emphatically any suggestion that they were used as political pawns. The fact is that tens of thousands came to other countries, United States, to Canada, across the world. Those who came to Israel came because they sought independence and freedom, and they sought restoration, and they felt that they could only overcome the experience of what had happened to them at the hands of the Nazis in a life of creativity with their own people. But I would say this as far as comparing the two problems. You would not refer to the fact, sir, that we have taken in 1 million refugees. These include over 400,000 refugees from Arab countries. There was an exchange of populations here very much like the Turco-Greek exchange after World War I. Yeah. We've taken over 400,000 Jewish refugees, and we've taken in and absorbed economically over 70,000 Arab refugees. You can't turn Arab refugees. I can show you United Nations documents on that. You can't turn back the clock of history. You can't try to exterminate a people. You can't feed refugees for hatred for year and year after year, and then expect Israel to take them in to destroy us from within. But I would suggest, sir, if I may, in this respect, in view of the very deep humanitarian interest you take in this problem, and I see that from the suggestion you've made to Arab leaders, and I fully understand your motive. At least this form of parasitic existence, this debasement, basic debasement of humanity should cease. And rights is one thing, but also life as it is lived is another. At least that should cease. But what I would say is this, that this creativity, and I take it right down to modern times, what I'm very happy about is that you agree today that the fossil has become defossilized. Now the problem is not so much now finding alternative term for the fossil since it became a fossil till now, but finding a term for the new creature which is being defossilized.
Yeah.
If I may say in conclusion, just on this point, I do hope, sir, before you pass another judgment, before your new book comes out, if possible, that you would visit Israel and weigh up the process of defossilization in your context and see this vitality and compare it in a historic span, and then let us have your conclusions. I hope you will be able to come, and I'm sure our people will be very happy to show you the country and to answer any questions. And we've no objection at all if you visit neighboring countries and have a broad Middle Eastern view of the situation.
Thank you. Of course, vitality is not enough. Morality, we'll just come back to that. Morality, vitality is grand.
On the morality issue, you yourself have agreed that we are like other peoples. That again can be looked into when you visit Israel.
Yeah.
Thank
you very much, Mr. Mendes.